Hey guys, I want to welcome back to the show Jason and Sean Mendelson, the sons of legendary Peanuts producer Lee Mendelson. And the occasion for this discussion is the release of You're Not Elected, Charlie Brown. It is election season as I'm recording this, and we have a brand new soundtrack release, newly discovered from the archives, newly remastered. It sounds absolutely incredible. Vinyl, CD, digital. So Jason and Sean Mendelson are here, but so is Seward McCain, who played bass and flute with Vince Guaraldi on these tracks in the studio in 1972. Welcome to Serial at Midnight.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Nice to be here.
Mr. McCain, have you heard this? You have the vinyl. I feel like I'm in the sessions with you guys.
It's nice that way. It's very it's representative of what happened back then, and I've got to congratulate you guys on the mix itself, because I listened through and I could hear everything. Nothing masked, anything. I could actually hear Glenn Cronkite's bass drum, and he kind of feathers it in a jazz way. So it's not a big pounding rock style bass drum, but you can actually hear it in there and feel it. And so there's a clarity to it, which is very nice.
And I would say, Seward, on that note, the guy who mixed it, Terry Carlton at Bones and Knives, he's a drummer. So there's no question that the drummers will be emphasized in appropriate fashion.
Well, I got to tell you, and I got to tell you, Seward, because it's the first time we've talked to you since you've heard it. And I'm so happy that you liked it. And again, the beauty of this for us was we found these tapes. We immediately heard you playing bass and flute. We heard Glenn, we hear Tom Harrell, we hear all of you guys playing, and it's really the first time you can hear that, because in the show, it's mixed down, it was mono, and it's wonderful what you guys did, but it's servicing the special and the cartoon.
That's right. Those are background tracks.
Yes, and so in this presentation, we really get to hear you great musicians, and of course, Vince Guaraldi playing these amazing tunes. And I just, before this, I haven't listened to it in a little while, and I just put it on before we got on this interview, and it's a killer record. I mean, it sounds amazing. You guys are so good. And so I'm glad you like it, because our goal is to let the world hear how great you guys were and are on this now 53-year-old recording session, but obviously being released for the first time. So,
yeah, where did the time go? It was interesting to hear these cuts, because of course it did bring me back, Heath, to that time and in the studio, and it reminded me of how Vince worked. And we would show up at the studio and just spend all day. Usually it was a 2-day session, and we'd spend all day recording. And so I'd take a break for a long time while he would play some guitar, maybe even do a vocal overdub. So there's lots of downtime, but we were just in the studio for the entire time, from the time we got there late morning until late hours at night, have dinner and all that. But he would bring in themes. He had already been talking with John Scott Trotter or Lee, and that he had a real plan. He'd bring in a storyboard on paper. Remember, I showed you guys one of the storyboards. Somehow I ended up with it, but it was fun to see a real storyboard on paper.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but he would come in with themes and ideas that he wanted to do, and he knew the timings of everything. So he was very well prepared every time. So it would only take 2 days to do an entire show, but it was sort of improvised. He would come up, he'd just start playing something. He'd say, well, okay, we got a cue here. It's about 1.5 minutes. So it's a little longer, or this one is, 17 seconds, that kind of thing. And he would just start in playing something and say, this is it. And some of it, of course, was themes from other shows or something he had done before. And we were doing a new version, say, of Linus and Lucy. But it was fun to just work with different people. On one record, it was Mike Clark, I think the next year, Thanksgiving. And then this one was Glenn Cronkite. And so you'd have a completely different interpretation from those drummers. Those two different drummers were entirely different stylistically. And so there's just another way to approach those sounds. But we just make it up. Sometimes he would just say, I don't know, we need some mood music. And so he'd just start playing something. And, okay, play a little bit, do something.
So it sounds like there wasn't a lot of pressure in the studio to get things down and like to come in and like, we got to, I'm thinking, this is the 70s. By this point, the Peanuts specials are already huge. So there must be some pressure associated with the job itself.
Wow, that's a good question. That was one of the most low pressure things I've ever done because everybody was so beautiful. Lee Mendelson, he was just a calming influence, and he would show up to the sessions, just a really, really nice guy, and just oversee everything. No one ever had any pressure. We would call down to LA because we did these in San Francisco, and call down to LA, and we get on the horn with different things, Melendez and various animators. Well, what do we need here? And sometimes we'd play something and they'd listen over the phone. Okay, that's fine. John Scott Trotter would show up, just a mellow, beautiful guy. No one ever put any kind of pressure on us. And therefore, you knew everything was going to get done. It was just a matter of doing it. And Vince was very purposeful. He always had everything ready. He knew what order he wanted to record in and everything, and all kinds of themes. He was certainly well prepared, but he didn't want to write things out and make it real mechanical sounding. He just liked it loose, play like we did in the trio on gigs.
Do you remember Vince singing on tracks? It's something that's been talked about. Do you remember the moment when he started to sing? If people were like, well, "What's this?" If he's going to take a take on Joe Cool or something like that.
No, I know that it was kind of an issue because he had not been well received earlier as a singer. But I was not at that place. No one ever said anything about his singing. He just would do the takes, and I thought it was just kind of hip. It was, like that old style of vaudeville actors who didn't necessarily have a trained voice, but could put it over. That's what I learned in my family. I had showbiz people in LA in my family, and they always said, you have to put it over. You have to make it happen. And so he just sort of sang really genuinely from his heart. He had kind of a nice little silky, gravelly, almost gravelly thing, but it was very natural. He didn't force it, and so I thought it. And plus, he could sing just like he played. He had that super groove, even in his vocals. I mean, you can hear it.
Joe Cool, back in school, hanging round the water fountain, playing the fool. Joe Cool, take it light. If the principal catches you, you out of sight. Take those shades off.
On Not Elected, he sings Joe Cool. It's the first time he did it. And I always thought it was interesting because he didn't sing earlier. And there were times where the other people did some things, or the kids sang in Christmas. But I think the story goes that Lee said, you gotta sing this one. You know, it's Snoopy's song, Snoopy's identity. This is one of the main identities Snoopy has in the strip, is Joe Cool. There's the flying ace against the Red Baron and all this other stuff. But for this one, he's Joe Cool. He's the kid at school who's too cool for everybody. But again, the irony is he isn't. And so they needed Vince to do this. And I think I think Seward has said it perfectly, but he kills this. He's amazing. His singing is amazing. He sounds like he is a professional blues singer who's done it every day of his life. And he really only did it on this show. And then he reprises it in the next show, There's No Time for Love.
Correct.
And then, which also Seward plays on. And then in Thanksgiving, he does Little Birdie. And that's it. Those are the 3 times it's his voice and Peanuts. But this is the first time. And I think it's an amazing song. It's, to me, it's Snoopy's main song ever. So it's cool.
I don't know a lot about his singing history, just a little bit I'd heard, but I don't remember him in all those years I played with him. I don't remember him singing live even.
That's crazy to me.
Played.
He's so good. It's crazy. You didn't do this at every gig you guys had. So I think it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really fun. It was fun. And that I was just an amateur flute player, and we had all this downtime, and they were futzing around with, I forget which one it was exactly. It was probably
Joe Cool.
Joe Cool. It could have been that was cool, in order, whatever order we did those things. And they just couldn't, he was trying different sorts of keyboards on it, and he was not happy. He didn't want it. But I was over in the corner killing time in another studio, actually, a little booth, where they do the vocal recordings. And I was just playing my flute because I enjoyed practicing, and I like Jeremy Steig, so I had learned a sort of a bluesy, airy flute thing. And Vince he kind of came up, he heard me through the doors and everything, and he came over to the studio and got me, he says, that's, I think, what we want. So he got, Ken, the engineer came over, and they just stuck me in another booth, a vocal booth that was already set up with a mic. And there I was with headphones playing my one and only flute thing. But I did it through the whole show. I think there was a few other cues where it was on for a minute, or not even. So I just did some funky stuff. Maybe I did on another show. I don't remember.
You did on Easter Beagle, Charlie Brown's Wake Up, a little flute run.
Okay. Yeah.
That was the other one, which was right around the same time.
2 years after this one, yeah.
But that's it. I mean, it's like Vince's singing, that's all I ever did professionally with a flute. I just was one of those guys that like instruments. I was a trumpet player first, so I still got
there it is.
flugelhorn. So I'm a horn player, and I like to play all kinds of instruments. So
well, once again, like Vince, you should do it more because you're brilliant and it makes the song. This would be a great time. He'd play his track where he plays the flute. It's amazing. It's so good on there.
So he just started playing that lick, and I just played along. I just said, okay, that must be it. And I think if it didn't work and I didn't get it, we'd start and stop. But everything was just right there. Actually, in those days, they did a lot of that in studios. Players would go in, they talk about the kind of blue album that Miles did. They just sort of went in the studio and put things together and started the tape. So
that must be a wonderful way to work, though, because there's no, studio time can be expensive time, and there's often that pressure. We talked about the pressure, but to just go in and just have freedom to explore. And of course, jazz itself is so exploratory. That's kind of a miracle, but I'm glad to hear that that's what those sessions were like.
Yeah, I don't think any time was wasted. The money that the Mendelson group put up, or whoever probably was also connected with LA, but No one ever pressured us that way, and everything got done very relaxed, and so we could really play. Everything was loose, and it brought the best out of anyone who went in there. You can hear it from all these players, these beautiful players on here.
It
Tom
shows.
Harrell.
It shows. This album, to me, we've now Jason and I have produced 4 of these albums, and this is the most fun that you guys sound like you're having, perhaps of any of them, because you're able to let loose. You're able to let loose on your bass. You're able to let loose, like you said, playing instruments. Guaraldi's playing his guitar. He's trying out some singing here again. And so that freedom shines through. And I think Heath would agree that it's just such a fun album as a result of your guys being able to be free in that respect.
It does sound that way to me. I've enjoyed doing all the music, but this one, listening to it, I've actually listened to the vinyl 2 times through, just since you sent it the other day.
Me too.
Because it brings me to that experience. I remember doing it. I would have, in many ways, preferred to be playing upright, and I did eventually. Vince put me back on upright, but he wanted that electric thing. So, and I enjoyed it. I love playing electric.
Sorry to interrupt. I should point out that Seward played on every 70s Guaraldi score except for 1971's Play It Again. He played on the most specials of any sideman with Vince Guaraldi, and all of them feature him on electric bass, like you said. It was like that period of time where his jazz fusion sensibilities and what Guaraldi wanted was that sort of 70s jazz electric bass sound.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that. What was that moment like when you're seeing, this is kind of an important time in music because the rock and roll influence is big. And I know a lot of jazz guys were trying to adapt to these times. Changing to an electric bass, could you just talk to me a little bit about what you might have been feeling and how you adapted to that change, if it was something you embraced, or just talk a little bit about that?
Well, I was younger. I was a half a generation or so younger than Vince. And so I was already into the culture. I was enjoying, I loved the Beatles and everybody who was popular in the late 60s. So for me, it wasn't a big deal. I'd already been fooling with electric bass, and I had even been trying to get a Rickenbacker bass, just like Paul McCartney.
Of course.
I never could find one. I found one years later, but the neck was warped enough that the strings were about an inch off, and now I know the neck could have been fixed, and I could have had a nice instrument. But this was a Gibson EBOL model with a long neck, and so it was something like the upright. So it was kind of fun. And there were a lot of upright players switching over and playing. Steve Swallow was playing beautiful upright, and so electric. Of course, he was a virtuoso string bass player. So we were hearing content on electric bass from lots and lots of really good players. So I was inspired by that. So it wasn't a big deal for me. But playing with Vince, ripping and playing all those lines, those wonderful things, it was more fun to play on upright when I did eventually get back to upright with him. It felt good to go there.
Well, you talk about how this music brings you right back to that time. How does it feel to be, we're over 50 years removed from the recording of the tracks we're talking about here today. How does it feel to be talking about it, to be listening to them again all these years later? And they're fresher than they've ever been.
Wow. It does sound fresher to me because, like you two guys are saying, you don't hear it in the show so much because it's designed to be a background, but this way you can just listen to it. And I never really had those tracks. I never had a chance to just listen to us, so it's really fun. How does it feel? I wonder where the time has gone. I feel like the same person, particularly when I listen to this record. I like the Thanksgiving record because it's a great show and it's fun to listen to. And so it brings back those. But this one pulls me into the studio with those players. I remember Glenn, and if you know Glenn's playing, he's one of the most interesting drummers you'll ever hear, content-wise. I mean, we had a who's who of drummers in the band from the time. Glenn Cronkite, who's one of the most interesting players you'll ever hear. Elliot Ziegman, who left us to go with Bill Evans, and another just creative player. Mike Clark, who could lay it down harder than anybody. I mean, he was a contemporary of Ndugu Chancellor. He almost invented that. I used to play with him in Oakland some years before. Paul Jackson and I would get together with Mike in his place out in the flat in Oakland and just spend time, 2 bases in. Mike Clark, and he never missed anything. He's like a railroad train.
And that's the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving sound, that record, because Mike Clark is bringing that East Bay funk, that stuff you're talking about. And that's what Heath and I talked about with Jason two albums ago. It's so cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. And a number of other great drummers along the way. Vince Latiano went with us after that to Cal Tjader for years. And, just players all contributing something. Just beautiful stuff. And on this particular record, it's Glenn Cronkite, and he couldn't be better. It couldn't be more right, because he was able to do all of that. How do I feel? I just turned 80, but I don't have any real sense of it, other than a doctor visit or two, more than I used to have. But in general, I got a lot of health, but I sometimes just wonder, where did the time go? Because nothing has really changed for me. But listening back is a wonderful thing, to go back that far and remember those things. But they were strong. They're good, strong memories. I have very, very good memories of all those people. I remember Bill Melendez. They'd come up, the animators would come up and hang out with us during the session. And so there'd be talk about what they're going to do with the animation. And then we'd only have a storyboard. So even then, we weren't looking at films. They weren't sending us rushes or anything from the animation. We were just looking at storyboards. And so we were just working with the animators, and they would, they were still recording voiceovers. In fact, you two guys did some of the voiceovers for that.
Nepotism.
And, and so that would be in progress, but it would just be, come up and hang out. Everyone was in good mood. Maybe we'd get some lunch catered in. It was just a blast. So they're good memories, That's how I feel about it. But one of the best gigs I've ever had. I'd probably still be in the band if Vince was still alive.
You would be. And I want to speak to that a little bit. We haven't, it hasn't come out yet, but we did get to go back with Seward and with some others. I'm going to keep most of this a secret, but we'd asked Seward to play some of the music for us in the same place we'd filmed, where he'd recorded 50 years prior. And without giving anything away, he plays perfectly. It might have been a week ago. It doesn't matter how many decades it was. He's a brilliant, brilliant musician, and he knew all the parts, and he knew all the instruments, and he knew the feel. And I can't speak to that long passage of time, but I mean, I started doing voices when I was little, so it's been 40 plus years for me, but not 50. But I do think that, Seward still has the same chops. So anybody that hears this and wants to get a great bass player or flautist, you know where to go. So
Nice of you to say that.
I'm not exaggerating. He played it perfectly. Hopefully you'll hear that in the coming years too.
Right.
Guys, should we talk about the vinyl itself? Should we talk about the release? It's a beautiful. There's 2 colors, right? I have there's the black and then the Woodstock yellow. Tell me a little bit about the full spectrum here. We got CD, vinyl, we got digital. Talk to me just a little bit about this release.
Sure. You want me to go?
Yeah.
There's 16 tracks that start off that comprise the show, plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 9 bonus tracks, but that's a little bit misleading, because one of the cool things is the Joe Cool that was used for the show was cut into 2 pieces and used in 2 cues. So one of the things we did in the main soundtrack part, which we call the front end of the album, has the unused cue. So that's really a bonus track, but it's stuck in there. So you could say there's 16, maybe they say there's 15 from the original soundtrack and then the bonus tracks. The score is the full version of the performance. So, for example, the Joe Cool and the special only lasts for 2 minutes. On the album, it's the full 5-minute performance that they did. So it's longer than the show aired part. So in many cases, it's the first time you'll be able to hear any of those in their entirety. And then the bonus tracks are made up of things that were either extra bits from the show that weren't needed, or they're just things we thought were super cool that were maybe not in there. And then and the last one of the things it's so great is sometimes Vince, for example, would play 4 or 5 dubs of his piano performance, but then on the show mix, you got one of them. So what's fun is if he did an acoustic that's not on the show, we got you the acoustic version. So you actually hear him playing which was it on this?
It's the final track. It's our Linus and Lucy.
Which piano is it on there?
So he plays electric
acoustic
keyboard on the first Linus and Lucy. The bonus take, which wasn't on the show, we added the acoustic piano back in on the bonus version of Linus and Lucy.
And then, yeah, exactly. And then, but it's so great because, and you'll see this on other albums too, he picked up whatever the newest toy was, and maybe Seward can speak to that a little bit, because he plays everything that had come out in the 70s. And on this one in particular, I mean, again, I'm biased, but I think this is such a great record. And our whole goal with this was to release it as part of the election season, because obviously it's about the Student Body Council election. But I just thought the first thing, I put this on and listened to it again, and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go vote. Like, it got me inspired. There's the Dixieland stuff. There's so much eclectic stuff in here. And
it's going to unify the country.
That's right.
It's going to unify the country, and we're all going to be soothed through the rest of this year by this music. It's going to calm our nerves. I think I even wrote that in the...
It really is. And again, it's written in 1972, not the most calm of times in politics either, but it was completely, this joyous music.
It's joyous. Exactly what I was about to say.
About these kids coming together to debate over who should be the student body president in the school.
If I could point a couple other things out about the production, our friend here, Seward, who's been really wonderful, not only to talk to and reminisce about all of this, but tell us what he thinks about what we're doing. He provided us with the pictures. They're his pictures from the live pictures from that period of time. So live gigs that were corresponding with that period of time when they recorded the album. And check out Seward's bass and Glenn Cronkite's drum. The best track, in my opinion, to feature those two gentlemen is Incumbent Walt's second reprise. They go to town. They let loose. And then when you listen to these incumbent waltzes on the bonus material, you hear totally different versions, even of the main melody. Guaraldi is going ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. He stalls the main melody line, which shocked me. And it'll shock fans because you're getting completely different versions of the exact same cue. And that's what's so special about it. And my favorite thing about this album is the dynamics. So we got Seward playing blues on Joe Cool. We got Blue Charlie Brown. We got the Dixieland or New Orleans jazz music. We have my opinion, the saddest piece of music ever is this little short one called Deserted Charlie Brown. It's 2 chords, but it's the saddest piece of music of all the Peanuts music, at least from Guaraldi, that I've ever heard. And then you have this 5/4 African sleigh ride. It is a gem. It shows up on a later special, but it is the best, most interesting, most mysterious piece of music, I think, on this album. I don't know what Seward thinks, but it's dynamic.
And as you just heard from Sean, he wrote the liner notes, which are incredibly detailed analysis of what's going on in the studio musically. And then Derek Bang, who's the biographer of Vince Guaraldi, wrote the other liner notes that sets the context for which this music was created in the time and what Vince was doing at the time. And we got all the art from the show in both the CD and the vinyl. And you have the wonderful pictures from Seward, the photographs, and go ahead.
And the most exciting thing of all that I'm going to tell you about is, besides Billie Eilish, we're the only people I know releasing this on bio vinyl. And Heath, you've heard it. Bio vinyl is made out of cooking oil, people.
Made out of people. Oh, no.
Made out of people.
It's not Soylent Green. No.
It's not Soylent Green. It's made out of cooking oil, and it holds up. And I believe this is going to change the whole industry, making the vinyl industry more sustainable. Everyone's going to be happy. It sounds amazing, and it's serving a higher goal,
And
which is to protect our planet.
All the paper comes from FSC certified sustainable paper. And the record, as Sean said, I think everything is compostable, including the bag. The poly bag, which you can open and close and reuse, is compostable. The theory here, though, is you're never going to get rid of any of this, so you don't need to recycle it or compost it. But it is all eco-friendly.
And it's new, and it's exciting.
And nobody's doing it in the States. We got out of this company in Germany called Optimal that does biovinyl, but it's going to be great, and we think it sounds great. And again, Woodstock Yellow is the one you get from Record Store Day. It's a Record Store Day indie exclusive, and then you can always get the black. And it's a great. We're very, very proud of it, as you can hear. And again, we worked on this for a while, and then you don't think about it, right? And then we just got them back a couple weeks ago to get them out to the world. They come out September 6th. And when I listen to the record, it's a totally different experience than it was mixing it or listening to the digital files or the CD, even flipping the record over and hearing the Not Elected reprise theme with all the big band or the big Dixieland sound, New Orleans sound, was so revelatory. I mean, we made it, but it's just every time I listen to it, I get goosebumps because it sounds great. And as I said, it is completely the music that I'm going to listen to as I get ready to go vote here, because it has that range of emotions. And it's the music that's set to this, like all the Charlie Brown specials, the pathos and the ethos, all the things these kids go through is very, very intense for children. That's the beauty of Peanuts. It's children going through some stuff, and it's what most people don't talk about with kids. And what Guaraldi and Seward and the band found was a way to take those emotions and have them be exemplified in the music. And you go through all those emotions. And just like the special, I think is a great special, the music tells a story when you listen to it on its own. And
like Elect Linus. He used to be called Dilemma on his original cue sheet. Elect Linus has one funky chord, and I don't know if it's augmented or diminished, but it's surprising. And it's a perfect little short cue that encapsulates this feeling of bouncing along, and then we'll hit you with something awkward. because that's the sort of feeling, that uneasiness. I think it's beautiful.
And one of the things, there's this little piece called Fast Piano Jazz.
Oh, yeah.
We call Cookin' Snoopy. And it's just an improv. It's just a little hit.
It's fastest cue.
It's the fastest cue ever.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
And we put on there everything they did because they tried it a bunch of times. And the one they landed on is the one that's on the show. But there's 3 more we stuck together.
As a bonus track, back to back to back. So there's fast stop, fast stop. And it's a kind of its own little listening experience because I don't think any music's ever been available like that.
But like Seward just said, I wasn't there. He was.
Yeah.
But you feel like you're in there with the guys putting it down and laying it down because they're having fun. And again, they're going from the saddest Charlie Brown song ever that Sean just described in Deserted Charlie Brown to the big band, let's go rah rah for the election, to the incumbent waltz, which is a beautiful, beautiful waltz. Yeah. And I think that's, I mean, who you could tell me, maybe you go back to Strauss or something, but Guaraldi's waltzes from Christmas Time Is Here to this one, to many others he did. Who wrote better stuff than that in any genre? And this is jazz. So I always think, as I said, if you like this kind of music, or if you want to be distracted from what's going on in the world or get ready to engage with the world, I think that's what we're hoping this soundtrack will do for people this year. So
I enjoyed that fast track. I don't know that there was even a name for it in those days. I think he was looking to fill a queue.
It was called Fast Piano Jazz. That was the cue.
Okay, right. And so we just ripped, for no reason at all. But one of the things that I always enjoy anyway when I hear these things, but it's on this record, you hear his voice in the studio, and you'll hear him count it off or say something, and that really makes you feel like you're listening to tracks and not a prepared album. So I thought that was pretty fun.
And I want to point out on potentially a future album, some of the times we're putting these together and we hear Vince talking during the track and we're like, uh-oh, or we don't think this anymore, but the first time we're like, uh-oh, that's not going to work. It won't match the show. So we got to figure out what we're going to do. Which stem has that vocal? Because it's not a mic for the vocal. It's just on one of the instruments. And then we go back and listen to the show. It's on the show. Vince is in the show talking. You didn't know.
Turn it up on 2 distinct cues and over 2 different specials. There's one little sound of Vince talking in the middle of the
and then it liberates us to leave all that in there because we're like, it's on the show. So you can't complain that it's not from the show because it's on the show too. But the beauty for us, again, hearing Vince talk, and you'll notice on the first track, Incumbent Waltz, we leave his count in and you hear Vince introduce the music, and it's awesome because for us, we get to hear Vince. On some of these other ones, we hear our father, we hear other people too, and you hear Seward on some of these. So it's very fun to realize that they're laying this down.
I think say it's the peek behind the curtain.
If you listen,
you get to be there in the studio. You get to see how the sausage is made.
And maybe I'm wrong because we're working on quite a few of these, but on the Fast Piano Jazz bonus, doesn't he? Maybe I'm giving it away.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
he said,
no, that's right.
He said, so it opens where Vince goes, he's playing, he goes, give me, what does he say?
I'm new at this.
He goes, I'm new at this. Give me a minute. I'm new at this. And then he plays the song.
And just that little bit of humor before he plays a song exemplifies, obviously, as Seward's described this whole session.
And again, this is what these gentlemen did. We've made it sound as good as we can, but this is their performance. This is what they laid down for the show and even beyond that. And so we're thrilled to let people hear that and experience it. This could have been recorded, in my opinion. They could have recorded this a week ago. It's not something that's ancient, but it is a time capsule and to me a historical document about what was going on back in 72 as well. So that's great too.
Yeah, I love that when Vince said that. When I heard that on the recording, I could remember him saying that. And what he was talking about was playing more free. Just play. And we had somehow discussed that. He says, well, I got to do something fast or something along that line. And so we said, well, let's just play free. And so we just started playing for him when we were kind of bringing it up. And he didn't know exactly what he wanted to do there because he wasn't playing through a set of changes or a tune or anything. So he's just kind of playing open. And he actually was kind of meaning, I'm new at this. It wasn't really his style. But as you can hear, he just took it and ran, you know. So really is, I really enjoy that a lot.
And that's the thing. We're doing this to celebrate Vince Guaraldi and Seward McCain and the musicians who made this great piece of American history. And again, how many things have never been released and are this good and have been in a storage locker for 50 years? And, you know, it's always been released as part of the show. And it's the show is amazing and the music of the show is great. But to have it come out now as the music alone, as a soundtrack with all those bonuses is, you know, it's wonderful. It's been our favorite thing. So,
you know, sometimes people watch, some people have watched our videos that we've done talking about these releases, and sometimes people will comment and say, I checked it out on YouTube or something like that. They're talking about the old unremastered tracks, and I'm like, oh, buddy, you have no idea. You have no idea how alive this sounds now. It's night and day. So I just want to encourage anybody, if you do love this music, if you do love these specials, and these are a part of your, not just your childhood, but like passing it on from generation to generation, and you do not have these yet, my Lord, it is revelatory. I highly encourage people to pick these up.
I appreciate that very much.
All three of us appreciate that, because I know we all put work into this.
And I also want to point out something, because you guys just brought it up. My kids, Sean's children are 16 and 14. Mine are 12, 10, and 5. I won't speak for his, but mine music is you say the name of your device and you call out your song. And that's it. It's whatever. It's the same song and it's great music, but it's instant on demand. When we did Thanksgiving, I had my oldest, who was, I think, 11 or 10 at the time, in the car, and he couldn't get out. And I had 3 other 11-year-olds in the car, and they couldn't get out. And I put on the car, I put on the
They were imprisoned.
I mean, we were in a long ride. They had nowhere to go, and they couldn't take over the control of the music. And I played Thanksgiving, and they sat there, and at first, like, what's this? What's this, Dad? And then it became, what's this? And then they heard all the songs in order. And then they said, oh, there's a record. What's a record? And I was able to show them the vinyl when we got back. And it was a new experience, right? They'd never even even if it was a Taylor Swift album, they'd never listened to the songs in a row. It's the song, it's one at a time, it's whatever.
New generation discovering the music, much like David Benoit and George Winston, who are the torchbearers for Guaraldi's. They discovered jazz through Charlie Brown Crisp in 1965. They were kids and they heard it, and that's what got them on the track to loving jazz and wanting to perform jazz. In the same way, like you said, his kids and my kids are now experiencing this music, you know, for the first time in this form.
And it's introduction to jazz, and it's introduction to music without lyrics in many cases. And it's a way to, it's also, for me, it's great because it's a way to let them listen to an album, which it didn't even occur to me that isn't what people do, because I still have CDs and records and everything else. And so to go through that and have kids listen to this and pay attention, and it's more than just a minute, was pretty fantastic. So I mean, that, when you just made me think of that, Heath, what you were saying about carrying it on to the next generation, I mean, that's the hope here too, because this, you know, there was a line, we probably said this before, so forgive me if it's redundant, but one of the animators, when they made a Charlie Brown Christmas, they were showing it and they were worried that it was going to be a failure and not go anywhere. And one of the animators had a drink or two at lunch, and he got up and he said, "This will last 100 years. And my father's favorite line on the 50th anniversary was, he was at least half right so far. And I think that's the beauty of this now. These are 50 plus years old. Christmas is 60 years old next year.
But
and
it
this
sounds
is
today.
The music is still as relevant and important to people.
The tapes were preserved. It sounds today. It's awesome.
Yeah.
If people miss the Thanksgiving, Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, you want to talk about how they can get their hands on that? I know there's something coming.
Sure.
Also featuring Seward McCain and Mike Clark on drums and Tom Harrell on trumpet. Go.
Yes. So the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving released last year for the first time ever for its 50th anniversary. You can still get copies of the black vinyl or the CDs from anywhere you get music. You can go to MBD Shop. You can go to Amazon, any of the normal places. There will be a reissuing in October, which you can get now, of a couple of variants. It's the same music. So I want to be very upfront with people that if you got the music, it's awesome, and that's great, but there are different color variants. So there's a
so if you're like our brother who collects every Pez in the world, now you can collect every color Thanksgiving.
There's a purple jelly bean, because in Thanksgiving part of the feast is the jelly beans. There's a purple jelly bean vinyl that is from RSD, so from your indie stores, your record stores. There is a turkey tan, which is what I thought was the coolest color.
That was the first one when we first started making albums. No, that's the one I wanted to have out there. So I'm excited that turkey tan's available.
Target, you can go to Target to get the Target turkey tan colored one. And then Barnes & Noble has an exclusive on a picture disc, which has the images from the special on the front and back of the disc. I think those are all available for pre-order now, but they don't come out till I think October 18th.
Third week of October. Yeah.
Something like that. But again, the existing black and CDs are always available, and you can listen to it all the places. You can listen to digital music too. And it's a great album. It's its 51st anniversary.
It's the funkiest one, as we talked about previous. The funkiest one because of Mike Clark and Seward McCain.
And Vince sings Little Birdie on there. And again, for us, we grew up with this music our whole lives, obviously, but we hadn't heard it like this either. So part of the fun is it's like, oh, wow, listen to this. This is pretty cool. So I think, and I'll just, since you asked, I'll shout out that we also released this year. It was a short summer Charlie Brown, which does predate Seward, but it's the big band. There's the big band version. It's the same crew that scored A Boy Named Charlie Brown, the feature film that Vince got an Oscar nomination for and lost to the Beatles. Speaking of the Beatles, but it's the same group that plays on that. And that's a big band sound. And it's a great record too. And hopefully there's more to come in the future. But all of those are available from all the places you can get. They're all in CD, vinyl.
Did you mention Pumpkin?
And digital. Great Pumpkin is the first one we did.
That's the first one we produced.
In 2022.
Yeah.
That's the third Peanuts show. And that one is also available. There's a pumpkin-shaped record. There's a 45, a 12-inch 45. There's a CD, all the digital. And then obviously Charlie Brown Christmas is one of the top-selling jazz and Christmas albums of all time. Kraft Concord Recording released 4 new variants for that. And please look those up. And there's a one that we did with them, or they did a couple of years ago, that's 100 tracks, or maybe that's not. I'm getting there. There's a whole bunch of tracks of all the stuff that they did.
There's about 70 things you can go out and get for yourself.
And the beauty of it is, all of this is from 1965 through 1976, because unfortunately Vince passed away very unexpectedly, very young. And all of this music, though, takes you from jazz all the way through the electric periods in the 70s, and all of it's incredibly fresh. And I think was fun for me, and Seward knows this better than anybody because he played on most of these records, Linus and Lucy is never the same. It's not just the da-na-na-na-na-na-na. There's a million different, there's I think 28 different versions.
Has a guero and has a samba feel, the one from Not Elected, for example.
So every time you get all this brand new stuff that he wrote for the show, and then you get his reimagining of his classics on each of these records. So by the time we're done with this, you could type Linus, you could be one of my kids and go play Linus and Lucy, and go, which of these 50 Linus and Lucys you want? And none of them are the same. And so the beauty of it is that music in that decade is so eclectic and such a time capsule, but also I think incredibly fresh. And I was just at the Oakland A's Giants game, the last one at the Coliseum, because the A's are leaving Oakland. And during the lineups, I'm just sitting there. This happens to me almost every day, if not, at least every week, if not every day. And the lineups are being announced and they're playing Linus and Lucy. It's just such a part of the culture, and it's everywhere. I was just in Tokyo in March and they're playing Linus and Lucy and Vince Guaraldi. I was in Sweden and they're playing. Everywhere I go, if you're somewhere where someone's playing a piano, they're probably going to play Linus and Lucy during their set.
If you're imprisoned in his vehicle and your son and his
one of my children or his friends, you're going to be forced to listen to Linus and Lucy. But you're also going to get all these different versions of it. And I think that's what's cool, because it's for kids and it's for adults. It's for Americans. It's for the world. It's jazz. It's pop. And it makes people feel good. And so that's what makes this great too, because on all these different records, you get all this music that hopefully makes you feel good and, gets you dancing like Snoopy. So it's pretty good.
It's wonderfully said. It's wonderful. It's all wonderful. And I'm going to put links in the description of this episode where people can find everything that we've just talked about. Also, our previous discussions. These are ongoing discussions. We continue to have these. I love doing these videos with you guys, or these conversations with you guys, because they're also audio. I put them on the podcast feed too. This seems like a good place to say thank you so much, Mr. McCain. Thank you so much for your time and for just walking down memory lane with us, telling us what it was like to be there. This was a real pleasure.
It's great for me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, Jason, Sean?
I just want to thank you, Heath, but also Seward. We've worked, like I said, very closely with. He's the coolest guy, the warmest individual, and a great player. And it's been a pleasure and an honor to not only work with him, but just hear what he has to say.
And again, it's been great to connect and reconnect with him, because whenever we have a question, we go to Seward, and Seward knows what's going on. So it also lets us feel closer to both Vince and to our father from that time, because he was there for that. And so as we relive all of this, it is wonderful to have that new friendship. And I want to thank him and for doing this with us too. We really appreciate it. And Heath, you've been great. We really love doing this with you. And we love how big a fan you've become or have been of this. And it's wonderful. So thank you very much.
And Heath, you have a new fan.
Oh, thank you, sir.